Okay, today we're going to start on Mem Vav Amud Aleph, 2 lines up from the wide lines to Stayim. Let it be decided, or let it be settled. It's over halfway down the page. Okay, we thank Hashem every day. It's we're learning. We should have the base of English immediately. And also we're learning for my father and for Naftali ben Bela. We had a machlekes about after we said that mountains cannot become forbidden even if they're worshipped. But what happens if there's a boulder from the mountain that got removed from the mountain? Would it be forbidden now, even though it was worshipped? Well, or we say not. We say no, it's part of the mountain. So we had a machlekes, and the machlekes was between the sons of Reb Chia and Rabbi Yochanan. One said that it's asur, and one said that it's mutter. The one that said that it's asur, he says, I have a pasuk that tells me that don't give me any logic to make it permissible. Pasuk is shakitz tishakseno, it's disgusting, and don't try to make it permissible. The other one says no, they have logic that proves that it's permissible. They have tzadashava, just like an animal, just like a mountain, just like an animal with the mum, that doesn't become prohibited. So to this mountain, this boulder, it shouldn't be prohibited. Marna says to stayim the bnei Reb Chia d'shara. Where it does this sometimes when we have a machlekes, but we don't know who held what. The Gemara tries to prove that it was one opinion that based on something else that they've said, which side that they were on. So we can prove that Reb Chia was the sons of Reb Chia, the ones that allowed the boulder to be used. They said that it's permissible. By Chizkiah, because Chizkiah had another question. Now Chizkiah is one of the sons of Reb Chia. So you have to know who's who in the Gemara to understand what the Gemara means here. But you really don't, because Rashi will help you whenever it's necessary. Rashi says that Reb Chia had 2 sons, Yehuda and Chizkiah. Okay. But always a discussion amongst the teachers in the yeshiva. Is it important to know the different generations of the Tanaim and Amoraim? You have to know the Gemara history to understand the Gemara. And the conclusion was that you don't. You can figure out almost all the Gemaras without knowing. And the ones that, when it's necessary, Rashi will help you, so you don't really need to know. But if you do know it, it enhances it. So, well, what's the proof? It says like this, because Chizki had a question. Zakaf beitzel ishtachves lamahu. Let's say someone takes an egg, and he stands it up. I don't know how he stands it up. You'd have to crack it, maybe, or you put it in a thing that makes it stand up. Spin it. Or you put it in like some sort of mold, so something that holds it up, like an egg carton. Put it in an egg carton. Oh, you put it in salt on there, and you dip it in, and you put it in the salt, and you dip it in. Okay, you stood it up. Samahu, what's it in? Is this considered that you've done something, to bow down to it? We're thinking now that you stood it up to bow down, and you actually bowed down. Now the question is, is standing it up, putting it on its side that it stands, is that considered an action or not an action? Okay. In other words, the egg on its own would be considered that there was no human intervention, and maybe it should be permissible. Are we thinking that maybe the egg is considered alive, and Balei Chaim don't? Is that the question? Let me see how they write it. Where are we? Membav Amud.
I don't think that egg.
Right.
For the word like an actual change.
Right, where it was cracked up. Right, you have to see in a second because we're still holding in the middle. Okay, let's see how it says it. We're thinking also that he bowed down to him. And Chizkiya's question was, this fact that you stand it up, is it considered human intervention? And therefore it becomes prohibited. Or if it's not considered human intervention. But if you didn't stand it up at all, we're not going to understand from Reb Chia's question what he didn't ask. He didn't ask if you didn't stand it up and you bowed down to it. Lay mitzvah, even though it was bowed down to, it still wouldn't be prohibited. Shmamina, from this we see that Bnei Reb Chia Desharu, that the sons of Reb Chia, they're the ones that they said that if there's no human intervention, it should be permissible. So therefore, this boulder that got separated from the mountain, there was no human intervention, it's going to be permissible. In other words, the whole question of how this egg should become prohibited was only if, even though someone bowed down to the egg, right? Someone worshipped the egg. The owner worshipped the egg. Yeah, but it was stood up by the owner. He stood it up. That was the whole question. If it wasn't stood up, then there wouldn't be a question. It means that you do need human intervention. And without human intervention, it would be permissible. Mer says, like, it's not a good proof. Because Leila Meimalach, really, I could say to you, the Bnei Reb Chia, the Asri, it's exactly the opposite. They're the ones that said, right, Bnei Reb Chia, Chizkiya. Bnei Reb Chia, they're the ones that said that the boulder would actually be prohibited. And that if you bowed down to an egg, even if you didn't stand it up, it would be usher. So then why do you ask if you stood it up? Here, what was Chizkiya's doubt? What was he dealing with? The question was, you stood it up, but you didn't even bow down to it. You set it up as an idol. Second. 1 second. Someone sets up an idol, but doesn't worship it. What's the halacha? It says 1 second. This is a machlekes later on in the Gemara between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael. The machlekes goes like this. Rabbi Yishmael holds that a Avodah Zara that a Jew makes is immediately prohibited, even if it's not worshipped. According to Rabbi Akiva, it has to be worshipped. So the Gemara says, Ulaman, Chizki asking a question that we already have resolved. Now, it's not that we really resolved it, it's a machlekes. But depends which way you're going to go. If you're going to follow this opinion, we resolved it this way. If you follow that opinion, we resolved it that way. So according to which opinion are you asking a question if you stand up an egg but not worship then? According to which opinion do you want to know is it prohibited? According to the opinion, which is Rabbi Shmuel, that says that it's immediately prohibited if a Jew sets up an idol, so then it's a surah. So then I don't get what your question is. Are you following Rabbi Shmuel? It's also. If you're following Rabbi Akiva, that it needs to be worshipped, but you didn't worship it yet. So I don't get your question. The Gemara explains that really Chizkiya is going to hold like Rabbi Akiva. And in order to make the egg prohibited, it's going to need to be worshipped. Stood it up to worship it, and you didn't worship it. Okay.
What does that mean? Put it on the stand?
Something like that. Comes along a guy and bows down to it. This is a very interesting point. You see, a person can't make anything forbidden if he doesn't own it. So now the Gemara says like this. This is similar to what was asked by what was said by Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda is a student of Shmuel. And he says like this. A Jewish person takes a brick. Now a brick is a rectangle. And you take the brick that's laying on its side and you stand it up. Because you set it up like as an idol, and someone's gonna bow down to it. But if the non-Jew comes along and bows down to it, then it's a surah. Now, the truth is that who owns this? It belonged to a Jew. Who bowed down to it? Someone else, a non-Jew. What doesn't even belong to him. And the rule is that if someone bows down to your item, it doesn't become prohibited. So why is it prohibited? Because the Jew set it up to be, he set it up to be an idol. Okay. And the question now of Chizkiah was, Levena, I get what Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel. It says Levena the Minker is a kivasa. When you stand up a brick, because it's a rectangle, a full brick is 3 tvachim. And I forget how wide it is. Maybe it's 1.5 tvachim, I think. Anyway, so when you stand it up, you're getting double the size, or something like that. You're getting it's recognizably taller. So it's very clear that you wanted someone to worship it. So comes along this guy, and when he bows down, it's as if he's doing your shlichus, even though it's not yours, it's not his, but nevertheless, it would be prohibited. Aval beitza loy, but an egg.
Prohibited from what?
I'm having benefits from it because it becomes an idol.
Let me ask you something. On Miami Gardens Drive, 1400. The guy who originally, because I was in that practice. The person who built that building and owned it was a Jew. Jewish doctor. He wanted a statue in front, so they made this cube that's you pass it by all the time. That's kind of being balanced. The black cube being balanced, just for a work of modern art. He's saying that if, and that's all it was meant to be. He's saying the Gemara is saying that if some of the Kachavim came over and bowed down to that, all of a sudden he can have his
No.
sculpture.
No. He set it up as an idol.
No, he set it up as
Good. So that's a different story. But if he set it up as an idol,
Oh, this guy set it up.
Set it up as an idol, but he never worshipped it. Comes along someone else, a non-Jew, and worships it. So we said that that's going to be prohibited. Now the question is, does that same rule apply to an egg? Because an egg is not as recognizable. You can't tell that it's why he set it up. Maybe there's no difference. He stood up the egg. Maybe that's what he wanted. So the Gemara says, "Teku." Now, where are we holding? Where are we holding with when the Gemara ends? We just heard about egg recognizable. Okay. Where are we holding now in the Gemara? Where's the Gemara holding? Is the Gemara saying now? Our original question was, what happens with the boulder? We have machlekes, right? We have machlekes for Yochanan and the sons of Reb Chia. We thought we knew that the sons of Reb Chia said that it's mutter. Then the Gemara says no. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe the sons of Reb Chia say that it's aser. And so why they ask the question about why did Chizkiah ask a question about an egg? Because that was a different question. That was when it wasn't even worshipped. That question was when it wasn't even worshipped by the Jew. That was a question about if a non-Jew can make it aser because it looked like you wanted him to do it. Or maybe we don't say that by the egg. Maybe we only say that by the brick. Basically, we steered away from having any impact on the original question if a boulder is aser or not. Yeah. Okay.
That boulder broke off naturally.
Right. That broke off naturally. Yeah. Exactly.
The person has to have the intention that this is like they're serving this egg. Because
Sure.
It's certainly breakfast. 2 eggs.
no, the only thing that I can think of is like some
Sorry.
like
Strong coffee.
like sometimes like they don't worship, but it's like animals. Like sometimes it's like the last egg, like an extinction animal. Like they treat it like very carefully.
It's just because they like it, sentimental. That doesn't mean worship. Worship is something else.
It's the only thing I could think of. I've never.
Yeah, that's not for worship.
There's a sentiment like that goes around some community. Everything is Avodah Zara. If you believe in alternative medicine, it's Avodah Zara. If you believe in this, if you believe in that, it's like a hype. Avodah Zara is something else. It's not. So we'll say, oh, the money is Avodah Zara, and it's not halachic. All of that is like a musar drasha. It's not there's no impact on that. Okay. Okay. So, boy, Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama has a question. Rami
We
Bar.
have to change the pasuk from H for heaven, X for heaven.
What's X for heaven? Oh, eggs. Yeah. Dr. Stein's telling us about serving breakfast. It's because we're worshiping the serving as the word. Okay. Boy, Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama has a question. Someone bows down to a mountain. So we know the mountain doesn't become prohibited for benefit, right? But Havana Malam is Beach. Are you allowed to take those stones and use them to build the altar? The Gemara explains the question. Yesh nevad b'mechuber etzel gavaya. Oy, ein nevad b'mechuber etzel gavaya. One of the disqualifications of a sacrifice is if the animal was worshipped. Someone bowed down to that animal. It's called navad. The navad is it has been worshipped. So what do we say? The same thing should apply to the mizbeach. It's not an animal that's worshipped. It's not usher to eat, right? It doesn't become an idol. So we learned that before. Balei Chaim don't become usher. But for the mizbeach, there's a problem. You can't bring it on the mizbeach. So here too, also this mountain, it doesn't become an idol. You're allowed to go camp on the mountain, sit on the mountain, walk on the mountain. It's not usher to have benefit from the mountain. You can sit in its shade and you can do all that. It's fine. But the only thing is, what about for the mizbeach? Say that it's usher, similar to the way an animal is usher. Now the Gemara says, Imtim Telaymar, Yesh Nevad b'mechubar Eitzel Gavaya. If we say that there is a concept of Nevad that's been worshipped, even though it's attached to the ground, regarding Karbanas, however, Machshiri Karban, Karban Damayolai, this is not an actual carbon. You don't bring the mountain as a sacrifice. You bring the sacrifice on the mountain. So it's only a preparatory for the sacrifice. It's not the actual sacrifice. Do we say that the same prohibition applies to Machshiri Karban, things that allow the carbon to be brought, which here, this is going to be a stone for the altar. So Amar Rava is going to try to answer this question with the Kal V'chaimer. It says Kal V'chaimer, Ma Esnan, when it came to paying a prostitute, so it says if someone used an animal to pay the prostitute, so that animal becomes usher for a carbon. Now, this Esnan, this payment, Mutter B'talish Lahediyat. A regular person is allowed to have benefit from it. We don't say that, oh, you can't use this is like prohibited. No, you could use this animal. Gets passed around and traded and whatever, and it ends up in your hands. It's no problem. But nevertheless, Asar b'mechubar legavaya.
Is this the thing with the dogs?
Yeah.
Similar to, there was also with what's exchanged for a dog, something else. Okay, now, let's say the payment that was given to the prostitute was something that was attached to the ground. So we're saying now, it doesn't say this clearly, but we're saying now, we're making an assumption that the same halacha would apply. That whatever it is, says Esnan, the same thing would apply, that it should be prohibited to be used in the Beis HaMikdash. Diksiv, Leisavi Esnan Zaina Umechir Kelev, You can't bring the payment to the prostitute or the what's exchanged for the dog. The pasuk concludes, Beis Hashem Elokecha, to the house of Hashem. Now, since it says Esnan, it doesn't describe. It says Leishna Talosh, Leishna Mechuber. It doesn't matter whether it's attached to the ground or whether it's detached from the ground. You can't bring it to the house of Hashem. So, which means even if it's going to be used as something preparatory for a sacrifice, right? It's going to be used in the house of Hashem. The same thing. So we take a look now at Nevad she'aser b'talosh. Nevad, which is something that's worshipped. If it would not be an animal, it would be aser, right? We're taking a look at the esnan. The esnan for a regular person is permissible. Something that's worshipped for a regular person is prohibited. When it came to the esnan for the Beis Hamikdash, we say even if it's attached, it's prohibited. So if the esnan, which is permissible to the hedyot, to a regular person, but even if it's attached, it's prohibited to the Beis Hamikdash. So something that's prohibited when it's attached, but something that's prohibited when it's detached to a regular person, for sure should be prohibited to the Beis Hamikdash. Also, betalish lehedyot. Should for sure be prohibited. So we sort of have Rava has a proof that the stones of the mountain that was worshipped should be prohibited to the altar.
Right. So if somebody takes water out of the river or whatever, and then some Avodah Zara guy worships that water cannot be used on his prayer.
It's a little more complex than what you said, but basically, yes. If it would be the person that took it out, worshipped it. The person that took it out, worshipped it.
But what if someone else worships?
No, because you can't make someone else's item also. Those people
No, it's you took it out. It's
right.
now your water. You're going to take it to go.
So if you worshipped it,
but you don't worship.
No,
Some other guy goes and does it.
No.
He doesn't make it come in.
Right. That was our question before. If the person had the intention to worship it and he didn't, and someone else worshipped it, that would maybe be a little different. Okay, Amalei Rav Huna Breder Rabbi Shua Rava. Rav Huna Breder Rabbi Shua is a student of Rava. He's a friend of Rav Papa. Later.
I'm sorry, but the water has the right, the salt, right, from the ocean has the right to be in the Beis Hamikdash, promised by Hashem, Rambam, it's right. So how does anybody else get rid of the promise that Hashem made to the salt? Then the water that was tachas the rakia, the pure salt is going to be on the mizbeach if somebody wants it. I think they nullify with Hashem.
Hashem didn't say this salt goes on the altar. He didn't say that. Just like he said, animals go on the altar, but someone could ruin it by bowing down. He said this one becomes disqualified.
But he also said that the salt from the ocean.
Right, but he didn't say this piece of salt. This piece of salt, you could ruin it. So, Amalei Rav Huna Breder Shula Rava, Rav Huna Breder Rabbi Shua says to Rava that you're trying to learn from the esnan, from the payment, that therefore the rock should be aser. Maybe you should say exactly the opposite. This is the efsher fakert. Maybe it's the opposite, right? From the story with the son-in-law, the guy. There was a guy, he got a son-in-law, and the father-in-law was a Talmud Chacham. The son-in-law was not such a Talmud Chacham, but anyway, he was worried that the Sheva Brachas is going to ask him to speak. He doesn't know it. So he asked his friend, what should I do? He's going to ask me to speak. And he says, just say Efsher Fakert. Whatever he says, just say Efsher Fakert. He gets up to speak. The father-in-law speaks first. He says a pilpul. So he says, now I'm going to ask my son-in-law, the new chassan, to say something. The son-in-law looks up. He says, Efsher Fakert. So the father-in-law thinks about it. He says, you know what? He's right. Everything that I said, it could really be the opposite. And he explains it. So he says, no, what now? He says, Efsher Fakert. So he thinks about it and he says,
the first time.
you know what? In what I said, you can really say it a different way. And in this new way, it could be the opposite. In this new way itself, you can say he's so impressed. He says it. He looks at so no, what do you say now? So he says, Efshe Fakert. So the father-in-law says, oh my gosh, you're such a Talmud Chacham and I'm such an Amaretz. So he says, Efshe Fakert. Okay. So here, Eichilach. Maybe it's the opposite. That really, we're going to say like this. Really, the opposite would be that something that's worshipped, even if it's attached, should be permissible. No, because it's attached, worship because it's attached should be permissible to be used on the mizbeach. And we should actually learn that the esnan, if it's attached, should also be permissible. Let's take a look at like this. Man nevad shasa betalish. When it came to something that was worshipped, what was the problem of something that was worshipped that was only something that was detached from the ground? Let's do this again. 1 second. Man nevad shasa betalish eitzel hedyet. If it was, it's usher even for a regular person, even not for the altar, if it's detached, right? It becomes an idol if it's worshipped. But mutter b'mechuber legavaya. But if it's attached, it's mutter to be used on the altar. Now, where do you have a source for that? So Shnemar, we have a pasuk. It says Elihayim alaharim v'leihaharim Elihayim. It says only the gods that are on the mountains and not the mountains that are gods. And the pasuk doesn't make a distinction. It doesn't say that that's only for. There's an assumption in here, an assumption that what we were learning the whole time, that a mountain doesn't become prohibited. Let's assume that that same thing would apply for the mizbeach as well. If that's the case, then esnan shemuter b'talish lahedyet. When it comes to the esnan, which that is permissible for a regular person to use, then for sure it should be allowed to be used, even if it's attached, should be allowed to be used for the Beis Hamikdash. If something that's prohibited for a regular person is allowed to be used for the Beis Hamikdash if it's attached, so something that's permissible to a regular person should for sure be permissible to be used. And therefore, what we're going to come out now is that let's say someone wanted to pay a prostitute with a tree that's attached to the ground. Can you now use that tree in the Beis Hamikdash for something? Beis Hashem Alikecha, the answer would be yes. You told me before Beis Hashem Alikecha that you can't bring it into the house of Hashem. That was sort of a proof that you can't bring anything, even if it's attached, if it was used as a like Savi Esnan, don't bring that payment even to the house, even if it's not a sacrifice. So we're going to say like this. I'm going to say, that pasuk of Beis Hashem to the house of Hashem, and that means even for construction purposes, we're going to say, look at the Tanya was taught in the Brisa, Beis Hashem Alikecha, that you can't bring the payment of the prostitute to the house of Hashem. What's that coming to teach me? Prat Lepara. She'ina Bolabayas. I'm going to say, if someone paid a prostitute with a paraduma, quite an expensive payment, right? Nevertheless, that's going to be permissible to be a kosher paraduma. Why? Because it's not Beis Hashem Alikecha. The service of the paraduma, that process is not done in the house of the Beis Hamikdash. It's done on the mountain outside the Beis Hamikdash. Yeah, the leniency here. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer, the Chachamim say l'Rabbi Sesrikuim. That no, on the contrary, Beis Hashem Alikecha is coming to tell me that I can't use the payment of the prostitute to be a covering of the walls of the Heichal or the Kodesh HaKadoshim. There was a gold plate that was put over the walls, and you can't use it for that. As it says, Beis Hashem Alikecha. Okay, whatever the case is, that it's not telling me that if the esnan was attached, if the gift to the prostitute, the payment to the prostitute was attached to the ground, that it can't be brought in. No, it's coming to tell me two other halachas, either according to Rabbi Eliezer or according to the Chachamim, but not that if it was attached to the ground, it would be prohibited.
I think considering make a significant change.
Is the detaching itself a significant change? I'm not sure if we're getting into that right now. Right? We're just saying it does become prohibited. we're just shifting now. That it's there's a logic of that the Gemara is going to discuss.
Yeah, isn't there a question if they go and then chop the tree?
Right. There is logic to that. So that was Rav Huna Breder Rabbi Yeshua's claim to Rava. The Rava tried to say that it's usher to use the stone of the worshipped mountain for the Mizbeach. He tried to prove it from the gift of the prostitute. Rav Huna Breder Rabbi Yeshua said, no, it's exactly the opposite. This proves that the gift to the prostitute could be used for the construction in the Beis Hamikdash, according to one opinion, not according to the Chachamim. But no, if it would be attached to the ground, even according to the Chachamim, it could be used in the Beis Hamikdash. Everyone would say that. So Amar Lei, so Rabbi says back to Rav Huna Breder Yeshua, "Ana kamina l'chumra." I was saying something to be strict. I was saying that we're going to learn from the Esnan that you can't use a stone to build the altar that was worshipped. And you're trying to tell me a leniency that you're allowed to bring an Esnan that was attached to the ground. Now, if you have an option between strict and lenient, so kula and chumra, kula v'chumra, l'chumra parchinan. The expression here, parchinan, is an expression that's used for a kal v'chaimer, because the kal v'chaimer ends off, parchin means to ask. And the kal v'chaimer always ends with like a rhetorical question. Would you not say that da-da-da-da-da-da? Right? If a strong person, if a weak person can lift 10 pounds, would you not say that a strong person can lift 10 pounds? You hear the question in there? That's rhetorical. It means I'm not asking for an answer. I'm giving you a statement in a question form. So it says l'chumra parchinan. Whenever you have a question of how to use a kal v'chaimer, you always use it. If you have an option of lenient to strict, you always use it for strict. So therefore, I'm right automatically. That's Amalei Rav Papa Rava. So Rav Papa is Rav Huna Breder Rabbi Yeshua's friend, also a student of Rava. He comes and protects his friend. He says, what do you want to hear? He tells me, you don't go lenient. The Pesach, what about sprinkling the water of the paraduma on someone that became impure, and you want him to be able to bring the carbon Pesach that night? The pligi Rabbi Lezer Rabbi Akiva. So machlekes between Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Akiva. What's going to happen is, his seventh day is the day of the carbon Pesach being brought. So you would sprinkle the blood on him the seventh day. He still can't bring it because he has to wait for nightfall, but someone else would bring it for him. So question over here is, are you allowed to sprinkle on Shabbos so that he should be able to eat the carbon Pesach that night? Now, or do we say that it's prohibited to sprinkle the water of paradum on Shabbos because it's Issa Darabanan? It's fixing the person, making him ready to become pure. You can ask, so why are you allowed to use the mikvah on Shabbos if you're not allowed to fix the person, right? That's place was asked that in other places. If we would hold that Tumah is really makes a difference, that the mikveh would really make a difference, it would be problematic. But our mikveh is just like an enhancement of holiness. So we don't say that it's like actually changing the person to the extent that it should be prohibited on Shabbos. That's right. But you can't put kalim in the mikveh on Shabbos. If you have a brand new vessel, you can't put it in and say, yeah, it's a cup, let me put it in the mikveh. You can't do that because now you're making it allowed to be used, which you can't do. Rabbi Lezer holds l'chumra, that we make a kal v'chaimer and we're strict, and therefore the person is obligated to bring the carbon Pesach. He doesn't get the Pesach Sheni. We don't say that he was tamei. What's the kal v'chaimer? We say if shchita, which is prohibited on, if it's not a carbon, it's malacha d'oraisa, right? It's prohibited on Shabbos. When it comes to a carbon, we shecht on Shabbos. We push it off. So when it comes to sprinkling of the water of the paraduma, right? The water of the ashes, the paraduma, which that's only a Issa Derabanan. So for sure it should push off Shabbos in order to bring the sacrifice. If Shechita pushes off Shabbos, right, you can shecht on Shabbos. That's one of the 39 malachas. Sure, you should be allowed to sprinkle the water. And Rabbi Akiva, he says back to Rabbi Lazar, he says, Lakula, you only do a kal b'chaimer to be lenient, upater, and he makes him exempt from bringing the carbon, which means the kaparach Rabbi Akiva lakula, which means that Rabbi Akiva was using kal b'chaimer to be lenient.
So that's the opposite of the parchim.
Right. Right? You told me Rava said that you only use a kal v'chaimer to be strict. Now the Gemara brings the Mishnah, the Tanan, started in the Mishnah. Hey, Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva responds to Rabbi Eliezer. He says, "Oichilaf," or maybe we should say exactly the opposite. We should go like this. Notice you have to start off with saying, yeah. First of all, we're not allowed to do the sprinkling on Shabbos. If you accept that premise, sprinkling of the water of the paraduma you can't do on Shabbos, even though it's only a rabbinic prohibition. That's shvus, means a rabbinic prohibition, and it doesn't push off Shabbos, and therefore the person can't bring the karban. Shchita shehi midaraisa lekolskin. Shchita, which is the raisa for sure, shouldn't push off Shabbos. Now, we shouldn't be able to bring karbanos on Shabbos. Sounds like a kal v'chaimer that we're not going to accept. But nevertheless, Rabbi Akiva was saying that if you're going to use a kal v'chaimer, then we're going to end up with this kal v'chaimer that you can't bring karbanos on Shabbos. So that's why he was rejecting Rabbi Eliezer's kal v'chaimer. Okay, so the question now is on Rava. How did Rava say that the kal v'chaimer can only be strict and not lenient? The Gemara says like this: Hassam, when it came to the sprinkling of the paraduma, Rabbi Eliezer Gamrei, Rabbi Eliezer actually taught this, that, what's wrong? Yeah, I'm on Rebbe. I had this commentary. Sorry. I'll start with the Maggid Shir used an art scroll that whenever he turned the page, the other people turned the page. But we thought we finished the Masechta already. What's going on? So, okay, Rabbi Eliezer Gamri. Rabbi Eliezer actually taught to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Eliezer was a teacher of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. He actually taught Rabbi Akiva this halacha that you can't sprinkle on Shabbos. But Rabbi Eliezer had forgotten what he learned. Now, I don't know another source for this, besides for this Gemara, that Rabbi Eliezer forgot his learning. I always heard Rabbi Eliezer never forgot anything. It's a bar sid she'enema b'tipa, he never forgot. So whatever the case is, also Rabbi Akiva comes to tell him, Ladkure, to remind him that he had forbidden it before. And that's what Rabbi Akiva tells to Rabbi Eliezer when he didn't accept it, but he says, Rabbi, al tachpireni b'shas hadin. Kach mekubal ani mimcha. He says, this is what I've heard from you. Hazah shvus, and eina deiches Shabbos. That hazah, sprinkling, is only a rabbinic prohibition, and it doesn't push off Shabbos, even in order to bring the carbon Pesach. Whatever the case is, it's coming out now that what Rava said, that he can't do a kal v'chaimer lakula, even Rabbi Akiva that did do the kal v'chaimer lakula, that it's not because he really meant that it was a kal v'chaimer. He was trying to remind Rabbi Eliezer of what Rabbi Eliezer had taught him, and he was just using this as a means to remind him. And so that's why he used it, but he didn't really mean that this would be a real kal v'chaimer lakula. Okay. Rami Bar Chama has another question. Yeah. What was this question before the egg? No. The egg question was Chizkiah. Rami Bar Chama's question before was if you're allowed to use the mountain, the boulder from the mountain to build a mizbeach. It's not prohibited for a benefit. Let's use the mizbeach. Now he has another question. Let's say someone bows down to a wheat stalk. So we know if it's attached to the ground, it doesn't become prohibited. Ma'al l'menachos, is he allowed to use that wheat for a carbon for the carbon mincha? Now this is ill. You mentioned this. Yesh shinei b'nevad, yein shinei b'nevad. If when you harvest it and you grind it, you turn it into flour, you're changing its form. And do we say that now it's changed? Or do we say that it's a nevad? Okay, nevad is something that you can't bring as a sacrifice, right? It was worshipped. Second, when we say yeshin b'nevad, ancient b'nevad, you're already making an assumption that we're going to say that it's aser. This is like a step further. Once you say that it's aser, but maybe it should be permissible because you're changing it. This should have been like an imtim telaimar. Imtim telaimar in the last case that we say, no, actually, the last case had another issue because that wasn't being brought as a sacrifice itself. That was machshire karban. Last case was only preparatory. It was only the mizbeach. Now it's the actual karban itself. We're going to say that it's but do we say that it's changed? So Amar Marzutra Beider Rav Nachman Tashema. Marzutra says, Marzutra the son of Rav Nachman says, let me bring a proof. It says, Kala Isur in Legabim Mizbeach. Anything that's prohibited to be brought on the altar, Vladisem Mutarim. Let's say there's an animal that can't be brought. An example of an animal that can't be brought on the altar would be either it was worshipped, or it was itself an offering. It was designated to be an offering to an idol, right? It's called muktzah, not muktzah as in Shabbos muktzah, but huktzah means designated. It was muktzah for Avodah Zara. The other option is that it was bestiality was done with it. A human lived with this animal. So that's an animal that's prohibited to be brought as a sacrifice. But let's say this animal has a offspring. Is that going to be permissible? It says, well, they say mutarim. The Mishnah says that the offspring is permissible. It's only the animal itself. Now the Gemara says, V'tani Allah. And we have a brisa that says on that, it says Rabbi Lezer Eiser. Rabbi Lezer says that it's prohibited. So
if the animal was pregnant with the offspring during the time.
Oh, very good.
Right?
Very good. So what happens now is that according to the Chachamim, there's a change that was performed here. Because when it's born, there's a change. And the Chacham say that it's permissible. So and according to Rabbi Lezer, even though the animal is born, according to Rabbi Lezer, it's prohibited. So it turns out that the shaila, the question of Rami Bar Chama is answered by a machlekes. If you want to follow the Chacham, it's permissible. If you want to follow Rabbi Lezer, it's prohibited. The change, the birth of the, right? Is that enough of a change, or does that work to make it permissible? The Gemara says, "V'lavitmar Allah." Do you want to answer like that? Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Avua, machlekes. That machlekes that between the Chachamim and Rabbi Lezer is kishenir b'la b'seif Hebrew. That's only if. The whole heter was only if bestiality was done with this animal, and then the animal afterwards became pregnant. Not bestiality was performed while the animal was pregnant. Because if the animal was pregnant then everything would be aser. This has to do with Zev Zagoyim. So it works like this. How was this animal made? From the mother. The mother. What's the source of this animal? Of the fetus. The source of the fetus is the mother and the father, right? But there's two causes to this animal. The mother animal had a problem with it because bestiality was done with this. The mother animal was prohibited, but the father was not. So when you have two causes for something, is it prohibited or is it permissible? It's called zev v'zeh. This and this is the cause. So it would come out that there's machlekes about zev v'zeh. Yeah, right. The mother and the so there's a prohibition on the mother, but not on the father and the father cow or whatever sheep. So Rabbi Lezer would say that it's aser. Aval ibrul b'seif nirbu. But if first the animal was pregnant, then came along a human and lived with this animal. So divrei kol asurim, everyone say that it's going to be aser, because we would say that bestiality was performed not only with the mother, but it was performed also with the fetus, because it's part of the animal. Now, if that's the case, when the fetus is born, then it's changing. You see that the change doesn't really make a difference. The change doesn't, as much as it changes, it stays the same. Yeah. So if that's the case, also with the wheat, we would say, ki ibrul b'seif nirbudami. The wheat was worshipped. Someone bowed down to the wheat. It's like it was pregnant already, and then bestiality was right. The wheat was already there. You just ground it later, but the change doesn't matter. Ikadamri, there's some say that that this itself, it's the same. We're going to say the same thing again, but this was just Mar Zutra that said the whole thing. He says, Vitmar Allah, Amar of Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravua, okay. Machlaikes Kishnir B'Lu Sefer Bru. The machlaikes between the Tanaim was only if it's Rabbi Lezer and the Chum is only if it was bestiality was performed, then afterwards the animal was pregnant. And the machlekes is zevzeh goyrim. Avalibral b'seif nirbu. But if it was pregnant first and then afterwards bestiality was performed, divrei kol aser. Everyone say it's aser to mizbeach. Nachinami, and okay, the same thing as here. Ki b'seif nirbu dami. Gemara, okay. So therefore, we would have our proof now. We would say, according to this, that it should be prohibited. It says hachi hashta. No. It's not so. Because hasam me'ikar behema b'hashta behema. Over there, the animal was an animal. Whether it was a fetus, it's also an animal. And so, what do you mean? 1 second, it was a fetus. It says, well, dashahu dachiza ba'ampa. There was a door of the womb that was closed, and it just didn't let the fetus out. But it's still an animal. Hacha mi'karachiti b'hashta kimcha. Over here, it's a totally different thing. It even has a different name. Here it was wheat, and now it's flour. Okay. Let's leave the Gemara right there. So basically over here, we're saying that the change is a different sort of change, qualitative difference, because here it's coming from wheat into flour, as opposed to over there, it's an animal to another animal. Fetus, the animal, is still the animal to animal. That's what we're saying.
By the way, I wasn't here yesterday, I'm sorry, but you did tell the story of the Chinese king that moved mountains.
Yeah.
And so just according to ChatGPT, there's two stories. One is just, it didn't really happen. It's like a moral of a muscle of persistence,
okay,
that he would chop away, supposedly to like the water on the rock, to eventually be able to move mountains. So it's just an example of perseverance.
Another opinion?
The other is that it's a different, and that the Chinese name for that guy means the fool or something like that. The other one is a different king